Okay, so thank you all for joining. This is the third of a series of webinars that Vikalp Sangam has been doing to understand climate change, carbon markets, carbon credits, and everything associated with climate. We started with demystifying carbon markets, and we also looked at the draft green credit program rules, which have been issued by the government of India. And today we are going to talk about geoengineering. I'm just going to briefly sort of give introductions to Vikalp Sangam and our two speakers today. So Vikalp Sangam is a network in India which is looking at alternatives to the current form of development. And this group regarding climate change and carbon credits was especially formed because there were a lot of questions that some of us within the network were kind of tackling with as we work with communities and policies across India. And so we decided to do these explanatory kind of webinars, which are of benefit to a wide range of people within India, but especially for people working with local communities themselves, and anybody who is wanting to understand more about the climate crisis and the climate scenario and the policies around tackling climate change. So I will just introduce our speakers for today. We have Soumya Dutta, who has been associated with environmental movements in India, and he's the key coordinator of MOSAM, or the Movement for Advancing Understanding on Sustainability and Mutability. He's also the founding member of India Climate Justice, or the ICJ. We also have Kavya Chaudhary, who is a researcher at the ETC Group, or the Action Group on Erosion, Technology and Concentration. The ETC Group monitors the impact of emerging technologies and corporate strategies on biodiversity, agriculture, and human rights. Welcome, Soumya and Kavya, and I'll hand over the meeting to you, Kavya. Yes, you can go ahead.
Thank you, Minal.
Thank you so much, Minal. I'll largely be acting as a moderator today, and just a few reminders to everybody who's here. If in case participants have any questions, please raise your hand and use the chat box as much as you want to put any questions or any comments that you have, and we'll try to address all of them at the end of the presentation, after the presentation. Yeah, that's all. I'll hand it to Soumya.
Okay, thank you, Kavya. And namaskar to everyone who joined. Today we'll be talking about geoengineering, but to begin with, am I audible clearly? Okay. To begin with, let me explain that there are a whole lot of variations of geoengineering proposals, different kind of science, different kind of technologies behind them. And there are multiple domains where these are proposed. And to complicate the matter, there is no universal consensus on how this is working, how they will impact, because as you can understand, there is a huge sort of push now from multiple governments, not only rich country governments, but developing country governments also, from corporations, from polluting industries and everyone. Whereas there is a huge resistance and pushback from a fairly large segment of civil society, some indigenous communities whose land they're being proposed on, and those bodies. So on both sides, there are a lot of arguments, lot of points being given. I will try to be a little scientific from my point of view, and not take sides. I'll just explain. But in any case, there are some science there behind this, which we know already. And I will not, in this debate, there are a lot of emotions involved, as it happens in most of these things. So I'll try to keep a little steer clear of these to some extent and present the situation as it is and the science behind. So let us first start with what is this geoengineering? Because this is not taught in engineering colleges. Geoengineering is not taught. So this is a term which has come into public domain not too long ago. But for those who know, like as science students, even 30 years ago when I was studying 30, 35 years ago, even then, some of these proposals were moving around. Because one thing has to be understood that geoengineering as of today is proposed basically to address climate change issues. And climate change issues means, climate crisis issues means that one driving factor of climate change is rising greenhouse gas concentration in the atmosphere. So how do you address that? Without one of course is very clear that you reduce that. But there is a lot of problem in that. I can explain that why it is not happening, because it is connected with entire economy, energy and economy situation. So, and the entrenched interests. But apart from that, that is the primary driver of climate change, the amount of greenhouse gas concentration in the atmosphere. As of now, it is around 420 parts per million. But the secondary driver is the rising temperature, because when we talk about climate change, it is more than global warming. The impact of rising greenhouse gases is temperature rise because of the capture of Earth's radiation, low thermal, low infrared radiation back to space that the greenhouse gases capture. As a result, Earth's energy balance has got disturbed. So what we are now measuring is how much is the Earth energy imbalance. So that's actually driving factor, secondary driving factor. And as a result of that, what normally people see as climate change, massive storms, very heavy rainfall and flooding, or massive forest fires, massive heat waves, all these kinds of things are the impacts. The first driver, I am just finishing this, reinforcing this, first driver is increased greenhouse gases. The second level driver is the rising temperature, which is impacting on the multiple Earth systems. And there are around 13 or 14 globally connected Earth systems, which are interconnected and which are being impacted by this rising temperature. So the geoengineering basically arises, the concept of geoengineering means that you have to change, or you attempt to change some of the Earth system characteristics. I'll explain what Earth system characteristics are in a very large scale, geological scale. If you do something on your roof, the same thing can be done in a massive scale. That will become maybe geoengineering. But if I do, like I know, I have been doing something for more than 30 years. And if I propose that, and that is for beneficial things, and that's a very good thing. But I'll explain what that is. But if you propose to do that in, say, a country-wide scale, then that becomes geoengineering, because you are trying to engineer Earth systems in a geological scale. If you do something in a small scale, if you put a dam on a river, that's not geoengineering, even though you are changing natural ecosystems. But if you are attempting to change a sea, or a reflectivity of a sea, or the salinity or the acidity of a sea or a ocean, or huge cloud areas, all those kind of things, changing the Earth system by engineering methods, human intervention at a geological scale, those are called geoengineering. And geoengineering is a sort of multidisciplinary, cross-discipline thing. Lot of science, lot of engineering disciplines come into that. So why we are talking about geoengineering more and more in the last 10 years, 10, 12 years, there is a reason. Because as I said, the earliest geoengineering proposals to tentatively tackle climate change were not new. These are more than 4 decades old. Particularly the space mirrors, etc. These concepts were 4 decades old. As I said, even when I was a student, I used to read some of this. Why geoengineering? That means changing the Earth system's characteristics over a very large scale, which we call geological scale. Why that is becoming more and more talked about and pushed is that over the last at least 30 years plus, what we have seen that the primary route to tackle climate change crisis, everybody agrees, is to reduce greenhouse gases to what science dictates. And science clearly dictates, and if you have seen the IPCC Assessment 6 report released last year, you will very clearly see that it's saying, and IPCC, let me also explain this, Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, is an intergovernmental body constituted by governments of scientists, economists, and assessors. It's not a radical scientific body. Second, it is not free to publish whatever the scientists think. Whatever the scientists come out collectively after reviewing thousands of peer-reviewed papers, that undergoes another review, and only what is acceptable to all the member governments collectively, that comes out. So even that somewhat very moderate, somewhat sanitized report, which was released in 2021 and 2022 till April, the assessment report 6, that very clearly said you have to reduce total global greenhouse gas emissions by minimum of 45% by 2030. Today we are almost ending 2023 and we have not started reducing at all. So more and more over the last, even after Paris Agreement in 2015, though there were people said it is an ambitious agreement, it was not ambitious. But even the targets that were tentatively set, that limiting Earth's temperature rise to 2 degrees Celsius, well below 2 degrees Celsius from pre-industrial state. And to be very frank, this year we are already at 1.442 or 43. But on average, we are at 1.2. This year is unusually hot year. So last several years, it has been seen that even though governments, businesses, everybody is saying, yes, we need to reduce greenhouse gas emission reduction has not taken place. In fact, emissions have already increased, except in 2020. And that is not because of our good intention, because of COVID and global lockdowns. So every year except 2020, the emissions have kept on increasing even after 2015, that is Paris Agreement. During Paris Agreement, the global carbon dioxide emission was around 34.6 gigaton, and today it is close to 40 gigatons. So we kept on increasing. So taking this, that we have not reduced, saying that we are not being able to reduce, corporations and governments are now more and more pushing for some other measure to control the impacts of climate change. Some are directly related to carbon dioxide, some are related to solar energy, some are related to Earth's radiation. So why do the Earth heat up? There is as I said, there is an Earth's energy balance which was there for the last almost 10,000 years. If you see the record of the Holocene period of around 11,500 years or 600 years, you will see Earth's average annual temperature over a 5-year period has never gone beyond up and down beyond 1 degree Celsius from the mean. It's record of more than 10,000 years. And that's a very stable climate. And that's the period where all our agriculture developed, all our civilizations developed. So human civilization is well developed, well within a very stable climate. Now we have gone beyond that. In the last 100 years, we have already crossed that. So since one input is the sun is giving energy, that is the primary energy content of the Earth. But that's not the only energy, of course. So the Earth heats up by absorbing some part of the sun's energy, part is reflected, part is absorbed, part is converted into some process. So that's one form. The Earth also, after receiving that energy, Earth heats up a little bit. So Earth radiates some energy. The sun gives mostly higher frequency, higher energy radiation, while because the sun's surface is at almost 5,800 degree Kelvin. So that is, if you see Celsius, almost 5,600 degrees Celsius. So the radiation that it gives is much higher energy. Visible light, ultraviolet, some infrared. but the Earth's surface is at a much lower temperature. So Earth also radiates, but the Earth radiates at a very low energy infrared radiation. So that's the second component. But there is a third component, which is the Earth's internal heat, which is geothermal heat, which is small, but which also contributes to keep the Earth warm, the Earth's surface, the atmosphere warm. And the atmosphere, the greenhouse gases also traps this low energy Earth radiation. So they keep the Earth warm to a certain degree. And the more the greenhouse gases, carbon dioxide, methane, CFCs, nitrous oxide, etc., polyhexafluorides, so more will be the heat trapped from Earth radiation. So these three energy inputs and outputs, they create the Earth energy balance. And because the sun has not changed its energy input or energy output, sun, there is an 11-year cycle which is going on, and we know that is now the 25th cycle will be a little higher, the 23rd and 4th cycles, 11-year cycles were lower. Sun overall has not changed the amount of energy it gives to the Earth. What has changed over the last 100, 150 years is because of the greenhouse gases, the low energy infrared that the Earth's surface, including oceans, land, forest, deserts, everything used to radiate back into space. They are radiating as much, but because of this layer of greenhouse gases, as I said, carbon dioxide, methane, nitrous oxide, the CFCs, etc., they are absorbing more and more of this low energy infrared radiation, and they are radiating it back, part of that radiating it back to the Earth. So the Earth's energy imbalance has gone towards, it has got imbalanced towards Earth heating up. And now the Earth is trying, the Earth systems are trying to reach a new balance. It's always, historically, if you go 460 years of, 456 years of Earth's history, there is always this balancing. If you have more input, then you will have, the Earth will increase temperature, try to radiate more. If it is less input, Earth will cool up and radiate less. So there are Earth systems do this balancing. So now Earth is in the process of trying to create a new balance. And that balance will be at a higher temperature, naturally, because it has to radiate more. And that is the problem, not with the Earth. That is the problem with us. Various kind of life which got accustomed to this kind of temperature range and this kind of weather. I'm saying this again, Earth has gone through much worse climate change in its history, geological history. So that's not this small change is not the Earth's problem. It's our problem. This climate change is our problem. So we need not save the Earth. We have to save life, and basically us and rest of the life, which is accustomed to this kind of temperature and this kind of weather. So since the primary route of keeping this balance, bringing back this balance, roughly at this temperature, is to reduce the amount of greenhouse gas in the atmosphere. That is one major push all across the world. All the climate conferences, all scientific research, that is the primary push, that reduce greenhouse gas emission. Or from all processes, from energy, from industry, from agriculture. Agriculture is a major source also, from transportation. So reduce greenhouse gas emission. But as I said, greenhouse gas emission reduction, just reduction is not enough. You have to reduce by a certain amount within a certain period so that the Earth do not heat up beyond what is dangerous for life on Earth. So that is not happening. So from that point of view, the corporations, the government started saying that since this is not happening, the reduction of greenhouse gas, enough reduction is not happening. Actually, reduction has not happened at all now. But as I'm saying, the rate of growth of greenhouse gas emission has slowed down. But reduction has not started yet, net absolute reduction. So they are now proposing that let us do something else. What are the climate change causes? As we know, one, how much energy the sun gives to Earth. So that is one of the Earth energy balance equation. So if we can cut down some of the solar radiation that is coming to Earth, then we can reduce the heat that the Earth receives. So even then, if the greenhouse gases trap heat, the net balance will be brought down. So that is called solar radiation management. So this is a whole class of, there are multiple kind of proposals. So this class of projects which proposes to control the solar radiation that is coming to Earth by some means, I'll come to that. That is called solar radiation management. This is one class. The second class is, we have emitted so much of carbon dioxide and still are being emitted. So let us soak or suck back some of the carbon dioxide either from the atmosphere or from large scale sources, because that is causing the heating. So let us sequester or soak back the carbon dioxide. So these are called carbon dioxide removal. This is the second major class of geoengineering project. And when we are talking about geoengineering, like I have done carbon dioxide sequestration in my home in lab. I have put a small instrument where I put a pump and the carbon dioxide or air was sucked in, and I ran it through a chemical, particularly calcium oxide, and it got into calcium carbonate and carbon dioxide was removed. But that was in my lab scale. If I do it in a very large scale, geological scale, then this will be called geoengineering. So that is the second major class, carbon dioxide removal. So all these projects, let me finish the third category. The third category is, as I said, in the Earth energy balance, there are three factors. One is the solar radiation, one is the how much reflected, etc. Second is how much greenhouse gas. Third is how much is the Earth able to radiate back. So there is a third type of or third class of geoengineering projects proposed, which are less in number, which are Earth's radiation management. How much the Earth can radiate back into space, not keeping them within the atmosphere. So these are the three major classes. One whole class of project target to reduce the solar energy that is coming down to Earth, so that if it is not coming, the Earth cannot absorb. So Earth gets less energy, Earth becomes less warm. So problem solved. In a sense, it's not problem solved. There are a lot of other problems connected with that. But the proposal is warming problem reduced. The second, I'm saying again, carbon dioxide removal, that we have already built up 420 parts per million, that is 0.042 parts percentage of this atmosphere already is carbon dioxide. So let us soak back or suck in or sequester. Sequester is the scientific term, but sequestration, many people might not understand. So soak back carbon dioxide and keep them somewhere, under the ocean, under the ground, somewhere in under abandoned salt mine, wherever. So that is the carbon dioxide removal. You have to remove the carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. And the third category is Earth radiation management. If we can increase the amount of radiation the Earth radiates back into space, then we'll again go back towards the balance. We'll reduce the imbalance. So these three classes of projects are proposed in 4 different domains. Which are these domains they are proposed? One domain is the near Earth space. Like if you go beyond Earth atmosphere, generally beyond 100 kilometers from the Earth's surface is considered space. That is the nearest, that is the closest space. So one domain is the near Earth space. And these are basically very old proposals that will send millions of inflatable, very lightweight inflatable mirrors. And if you use aluminized polyester films or polyethylene films, you can have large mirrors with very low weight, which can unfold in space. So one kind of proposal is we'll launch, and today rocket technology is very well suited to this. In fact, one Falcon 9 Heavy can send maybe 20,000 such giant mirrors. So it's not technologically very difficult. It's very, very feasible. So this class of proposal says that let us launch into orbit millions of inflatable mirrors, very thin, lightweight mirrors, which will unfold in the orbit and which will shield the solar energy from reaching down to Earth. So that's one class of proposal. These are called solar. Good, let this be there. These projects are called solar radiation management. You are trying to reduce the incoming solar radiation. No, keep the first one. Right. So you can see these are mirrors on the left side, space mirrors. So these are one kind of proposal. This is little expensive, but I am saying again, this is very much feasible with today's technology. And this kind of thousands of satellites are being launched regularly. So launching millions of mirrors is not really very difficult if it was done. But there are impacts which will come to later. The second type of project in this, let me talk about the domains first. So this is one domain. This is space, near Earth space. The second domain is the atmosphere, like our entire atmosphere from the ground level to around, say, 60, 70 kilometers. That is the atmosphere, because atmosphere goes up to 100, but beyond 50, 60, it's very thin. So not anything is proposed there. So what we are proposing, the scientists and corporations and groups, what they are proposing is, if you put large amount of reflective fine particles, which are called aerosols, in the stratosphere, which is above 15, 16 kilometers of Earth's surface. See, from the Earth's surface to around, it varies, because during the day, the troposphere expands, and during night, it shrinks. Summer, it expands, winter, it shrinks. So there is no fixed height of atmospheric divisions, troposphere, stratosphere, mesosphere, exosphere. There's no fixed division, but roughly around 15 kilometers is the troposphere, where most of the weather event, all the storms, clouds, rains, winds, everything takes place within that 15 kilometers. Beyond that is the stratosphere. So if you put millions of tons of very fine reflective particles in the stratosphere, then they will act like mirrors. And one of the very cheap reflective particles are sulfate particles. And this idea came from actually volcanic eruptions. Of course, this was observed many, many times in the human history. In fact, AD 536, massive volcanic eruption actually plunged the Earth into cooling. And this happened repeatedly. But most recently, in 1991, the Pinatubo volcanic eruption, that ejected several million tons of sulfur particles into the stratosphere. That's a massive eruption. And as a result, it was noticed that for 14 to 15 months, the whole Earth's temperature, average global temperature, dropped by 0.6 degrees Celsius. That means at the rate that we are increasing now, 0.2 to 0.22 degrees Celsius per decade. So it is 20-25 years of warming was cooled down just by one big volcanic eruption. So this was known. In fact, after 1991, this was discussed, but this got the global attention after 2006, that famous paper by the Nobel laureate Paul Crutzen, or Crutzen, however, whatever his pronunciation is a Nobel laureate in chemistry. What he proposed, that we can tackle climate change, the global warming, by copying what the volcanoes do. We can inject or eject millions of tons of sulfur particles, that is not elemental sulfur, but sulfur dioxide, which will turn into sulfate and sulfate particles in the atmosphere. So these will act as tiny mirrors, and these will reflect back a part of the solar radiation which was otherwise coming to Earth. So though if they don't come down to the lower atmosphere and the ground, then Earth will not heat up as much. So these are the domains of atmosphere. There are other atmospheric domains. I'll come to that. The third domain is the ocean. See, if the water or ocean, the oceans are the largest water bodies, around 71%. So the third domain says that we can also change the characteristics, geological scale of the ocean surface and how the ocean reacts. There are two kinds of proposal. One comes under solar radiation management in the ocean, which is creating, if you have, most of us have been to coastlines, and if you have seen waves breaking, when the waves break, they look white. The seawater is bluish or turquoise or kind of that, greenish and really bluish in between. But when the waves break, the top is very white. The reason is, when it is breaking, it traps a lot of air bubbles, very tiny air bubbles, air. And this air, when captured by water, it becomes very reflective. So the proposal is trillions and trillions or quadrillions of micro bubbles being created on the ocean surface by some kind of pumping, so that the ocean surface become much whiter. The water surface itself becomes much whiter. So if they becomes much whiter, they will reflect, because ocean is very heat absorbing. Roughly around 93 to 94% of the solar energy that falls on the ocean surface is absorbed. Only around 6-7% is reflected back. And that's also a critical aspect of climate change, but I'm not right now going into that. So if we increase the albedo or reflectivity, albedo is how much percentage of the incoming radiation is being reflected by a surface. That's called albedo. If you have surface albedo like desert sand, its albedo is from 0.3 to 0.4. So that means 30% to 40% of the incoming radiation, a desert reflects back into space. A forest's albedo is 0.1718. So the forest is actually much more absorbing. So forest actually create more warming from the solar radiation than a desert, which is counterintuitive, but which is scientifically. So albedo is how much, what percentage of the incoming radiation that surface is reflecting back. So if we can increase the albedo of the ocean surface by creating a lot of microbubbles, lot means quadrillions of microbubbles in large areas, then the radiation that the ocean absorbs and heats up is much less. That is the third domain, that is the oceans. The fourth domain is land. Land is an area that we dominate, and land is one area we can easily work on, and we are working on. In fact, we have done geoengineering from the time we created agriculture, or we started agriculture in large scale, because the earth that was there 11,000 years ago is no longer there. In fact, the characteristics, the reflectivity, that is the albedo, the rest of the earth system, we have already changed it without, at that point of time, without understanding. What we have done, we didn't know. But now we know that one kind of geoengineering we have already done with the earth. It's a very large scale, even not only continent, multi-continent scale. But what we are now proposing, that we will be doing the same thing knowingly, that we will know what we are doing, and we'll do this to address a particular problem. So the fourth domain or fourth area of operation is the land. In land, there are multiple proposals also. Like if you think of solar radiation management, you can create a land surface which is much more reflective. In that, I'll come to later. There is one proposal or one actually something which is being done, which is beneficial in large scale, city level scales. But if we go into much more than city level scales, then there are other impacts. But what we do in land is, see, there is a lot of glaciers, snow, ice, and which are very vital as water resources. So there is one kind of proposal to increase the reflectivity of surfaces near the ice and snow, the glacial areas, and on top of that. So basically, if we increase the reflectivity, solar energy will be reflected back. So these are the four domains. Now let me come into let me repeat these domains and then come into what kind of geoengineering proposals. Very quickly, I'll go through that because there's a very large variety. We'll not go into deep into all of this. So the domains are, one is near Earth space, second is atmosphere, third is the oceans, fourth is the land. So on the near Earth space, the major proposal is mirrors, the very lightweight reflective mirrors. I'll not go into that. That's very obvious. Impacts will come later. On the atmosphere, there are multiple proposals. One proposal, as I said, in the stratosphere, let us put a lot of reflective particles. This can be sulfate particles, this can be titanium particles, this can be something else. So on a very large scale, if we spray this either by specially designed aeroplanes, because normal aeroplanes, normal commercial jet planes, their ceiling is a little lower. They don't go into the stratosphere regularly. They don't go, not regularly, they don't go, except in night, except in winter time, if they go. So we'll have to design some more efficient, large aspect ratio, large wing airplanes, or by cannons, or by high altitude balloons, and or by very simple rockets, atmospheric rockets, sounding rockets, and then we'll deliver millions of tons of reflective aerosol particles. So that's the primary proposal. And some years ago, Royal Society in UK, they did an assessment of multiple geoengineering proposals that were floating around in the market. And they found, it is very surprising, they found that stratospheric aerosol injection, SAI, is the most viable, most cost-effective way to tackle warming by geoengineering. We'll come to the adverse impacts later. I'm saying there are adverse impacts, multiple bad impacts, but that was the finding of the Royal Society, the apex body of scientists. So that's one kind of proposal in the atmospheric domain. Second kind of proposal is marine cloud whitening or brightening. What is the proposal? That as we all know, 71% is of the surface is covered by ocean. So if we install ship-based or floating platforms which pump very fine, that is atomizer, if you spray water at high speed, it gets divided into very fine particles. So if we basically scale that up and spray ocean water into the atmosphere, into air, little high altitude, not very high altitude, till within the troposphere, some altitude, then what happens is the water tends to evaporate and the very fine salt particles, they act as seed for cloud formation. And these clouds, the more seeds they get, because a lot of moisture is there on the oceans. So more moisture needs more seed, creates more cloud. And these clouds are generally white or very whitish. So more the cloud, more the solar energy will be reflected back to space. So Earth will not heat up as much as it is heating up. So this is basically the proposal for marine cloud brightening or marine cloud whitening. And this has to be done not in very small scale, obviously, in tens of thousands of square kilometers. Even very large areas of oceans. So this is the second kind of atmospheric domain that is proposed. The one thing that I must mention here, there is a confusion in some people. In many publications, the carbon capture and storage, which I will explain right after this, is categorized as geoengineering. But in effect, wherever geoengineering is considered in a scientific term, the carbon capture and storage is not considered as geoengineering project unless it's a large-scale CDR, that is carbon dioxide removal by changing the Earth system. If you put 10 projects to sequester carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, that's not considered geoengineering projects. So that is a difference that a lot of even this NGO sites are making a mistake. They are including carbon CCS projects. Those CCS are not part of geoengineering by definition. Let us come to the ocean domain. Ocean means water, large-scale water bodies, sea, ocean. What is the proposal? One proposal is that you see oceans contain phytoplankton, lot of marine plants, marine vegetation. The base of all food in the ocean is phytoplankton. It is microscopic green. Here it is there. I think on the right-hand side it is there. This green patch on the ocean. So if you, how the phytoplankton grows, they need sunlight. They are living in the ocean water and they need nutrients. And most of the ocean waters, unless it is in a coastal area and there is an upwelling from the bottom, the ocean water is not very nutrient rich. That's why you see this coastal areas, particularly where a lot of coral reefs are there, that there is a coastal upwelling because of the continental formation, like coast of Peru, coast of South America, where there is a lot of upwelling, where ocean water coming up from the bottom. And the bottom is very nutrient rich because for millions and millions of years, marine animals, marine plants are dying and getting down in the ocean bottom. So if the water comes up from the bottom, it is food rich. So if that food rich or nutrient rich water comes up, then phytoplankton growth goes up. And if the idea is or the proposal is, if you can artificially boost up phytoplankton growth. Phytoplankton is a basically photosynthetic organism. So it will take out carbon dioxide from the dissolved oxygen, and it will take the sunlight, the carbon dioxide, it will create organic material, and ultimately when it dies, it will sink to the ocean bottom, and after that there will be some silt and something on top. So this carbon dioxide will be effectively removed from the atmosphere and will be put down in the ocean bed. So effectively atmospheric carbon dioxide concentration will be slowly brought down. This is the idea. The problem is, as I said, most ocean waters are not very nutrient rich. So the proposal is, if we can add nutrients which the phytoplankton need, then in those large areas of oceans, why there is repeated entering waiting room is, if we can increase the nutrients in the ocean waters where it is not nutrient rich, food rich, then the phytoplankton will grow much better and they will take out the carbon dioxide. So this is the other, I will come to impacts later on, but this is the ocean, one of the ocean areas. The other area, as I said, ocean domain, this is the brightening of ocean surfaces. That's another area. Let me quickly come down to land, because there are multiple types. I will not touch all of this. On the land, there are multiple proposals again. As I said, on the solar radiation management, the proposals are either you change the reflectivity of snow ice areas, you change the reflectivity of built environment. One of the proposals for built environment albedo change, albedo is the reflectivity, is actually being practiced by indigenous, not only indigenous, by societies for thousands of years, and that's for beneficial purpose. There was a question, is there any beneficial kinds of action? Like if you go to Greece, in Europe, you go to Greece, or you go to desert areas, you go to very hot areas, you see roofs are generally white or very light color. Roof, the terrace and the roof, and the surface which gets most of the sun, these are either white or very light color, because white or close to white, they reflect maximum amount of incident radiation. There is a sunlight that is falling, some sunlight and solar heat that is falling on them, they reflect back. So if you do this in very large scale, that is reducing the albedo, increasing the albedo, reducing the heat gain, and reducing the warming. So in city-wide scale, cities have done that on their own long before climate change has become a problem, but that is for their own local weather control or climate control or comfort. Because if my house heats up too much, I am uncomfortable. If my house has higher albedo, I have a better weather inside my house. So this is one proposal also, a lot of scientists and a lot of others says, since this is being done, why not scale it up in very large scale, mega scale? That is one. This other proposal is also on CDR. Let me say one proposal on CDR. This is called weathering, enhanced weathering. What is weathering? When weather works, one of the processes is some of the rocks or minerals, particularly silicate, calcium oxide, etc. Some of the rocks, they absorb carbon dioxide naturally. They became carbonate rocks, and that means that carbon dioxide which reacted with that mineral or the rock gets bound with that rock, and in millions of years it will not come out very clearly, because a rock is not going to decompose easily. It will stay there for millions and millions of years, so that carbon dioxide is removed. But can we increase the weathering of carbon dioxide, taking up carbon dioxide artificially? So one proposal is spreading very large areas, maybe in the desert, maybe in open areas, with very finely granulated, finely crushed silicate rocks and other rocks which absorb carbon dioxide. So if we crush them very fine, their surface area increases, the area that can react with the carbon dioxide, atmospheric carbon dioxide, increases. That means they can absorb more carbon dioxide and bind that as carbonate rock. So one proposal is spread large areas of land with finely crushed minerals which will absorb carbon dioxide, so that weathering will increase. This is called enhanced weathering. So I'll not go into more details of each of these. Now let me, because I don't know what is the time now. Let me come to the impacts. There are other kinds of, let me just finish another proposal which is dangerous in multiple respects. There is another area which combines geoengineering and genetic modification. That is, genetic engineering and geoengineering is combined to do a geoengineering kind of proposal. And that is, as I said, the plants, if you consider a field of crops or a forest or a grassland, these do not reflect back much. Their albedo is very low. As I said, 0.15 to 0.17, 0.18. That means they absorb a lot of solar radiation and they create warming. But if you genetically modify those plants, like say wheat, rice, maize, potato, soybean, these are cultivated in very large scale globally. If we genetically modify some of these plants so that their leaves become lighter and they absorb less, reflect more sunlight, then because these are being cultivated very, very large scale, a very large area of Earth's surface will become more reflective. The albedo will increase. So Earth's net heat gain will go down. So warming will go down a little. So this is a proposal for CDR, also solar radiation management, because there is another kind of proposal that we can genetically engineer plants to absorb or sequester more carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. Plants are very low efficiency carbon dioxide removal mechanism. In fact, mechanical things can remove carbon dioxide much more efficiently. Plants remove very, very small. The amount of radiation they receive, they actually sequester something like 0.89 to 2.2. That is the maximum. That means 98% they cannot sequester. But if we genetically modify them, they can sequester, if say 5, 6, 8%. That means the efficiency of carbon sequestration will be 3 to 4 times higher. And then much of this all this carbon dioxide will come out from the atmosphere. So the atmospheric carbon dioxide amount will go down. So the global warming will go down. So there are two kinds of genetic engineering combined geoengineering. One is solar radiation management. You genetically engineer plants to be more reflective. Second is genetically engineer plants to be more carbon absorbing. That carbon sequestration efficiency should go up. So there are other variations of this. Now let me quickly come to impacts and 1-2 Indian projects and why we are opposing. Most of us are opposing. So on terms of impact, the most quote unquote advanced proposals are solar radiation management. In fact, two proposals, two kinds of proposal. One kind of proposal is solar radiation management, both on atmosphere, that is the stratospheric aerosol injection is the most sort of favored proposal by governments and corporates. And there are a lot of experiments being attempted again and again. So what are the problems with that? One very clear thing that anyone can understand, if you inject millions of tons of sulfur dioxide into the stratosphere, this will be there for some years, 2, 3, 4, 5 years, maybe 2, 3 years is the average residence time, 2 years, 3 years. But after that, they will have to come down. They cannot be there because the water vapor is there, water molecules bind with them. So they become heavier, they slowly come down. And when sulfate particles combine with water molecules, they become something called sulfuric acid. And most people are familiar with acid rain. So if we are sending millions and of tons to every year to the stratosphere, then after 2, 3 years, we should be ready to get multiple millions and tons, because with the water, the volume and amount will increase of tons of sulfuric acid coming down into all our fields. So that's one. Second is, many of these atmospheric aerosols, they react with the ozone layer. In fact, they actually degrade the ozone molecule into oxygen and free oxygen atom. And if the ozone concentration goes down, there is a difficult problem of ultraviolet C, very harmful ultraviolet radiation coming down. That's the second kind of impact. More ultraviolet radiation will penetrate if the ozone concentration goes down. And these aerosols have a tendency to react with the ozone layer, because the ozone, unfortunately for these proposals, is also created and is spread in the stratosphere. So for effectiveness, aerosol injection has to be in the stratosphere, and the ozone is there in the stratosphere. So it will be reacting with the ozone and degrading the ozone. The third major impact, I'll not go into all the impacts, third major impact is the change of rainfall patterns on different areas. See, if we know why the South Asian monsoon comes, it comes because of a long period of very high heating northern plains and trans-Himalayan plains. Because the summer heating takes place, the air goes up, and this particularly in the Hadley cycle, in the global wind cycle. So the monsoon wind is brought forward by that. And since the monsoon comes from the ocean, it brings in a lot of moisture and lot of rain. So that's a lifeline of most of the nations. And for us in South Asia, the South Asian monsoon is a lifeline. So if there is lot less heating because of either atmospheric or stratospheric aerosols or space mirror or whatever, then the atmospheric heating of northern Indian plains and the trans-Himalayan plains will be much less. And that means there will be less force to bring in the monsoon winds. And that means there will be less monsoon rainfall. And that means there will be much less food production, maybe drought, maybe famine. So these are major crises. That's why there is very strong resistance to this. I'll change over to the next one. Say the second major area that is now being forced. In fact, even the last climate conference in Egypt, in Sharm el Sheikh, when we were there, we were attending some big conferences, meetings, and very famous scientific institution, Woodsole. You might be knowing about this, one of the most famous oceanographic institute. They, Scripps institutions, many other universities, they were all proposing geoengineering proposals of CDR, that is ocean CDR, ocean carbon dioxide removal. As I said earlier, basically the proposal is in large areas of ocean, there is very little nutrient. So if you add nutrient, and these experiments were done around 17 times. As far as I know, 17 times in the last 12, 13 years. And except twice, the results were all negative. Negative means it was nowhere near what was expected. So the basic proposal is, as I said, but let me explain again. You add lot of nutrients, and in this case, the scientists involved, they chose iron sulfide particles, very finely ground iron sulfide particles, because that is one of the nutrients which can create phytoplankton boom. So if the phytoplankton gets more nutrients, they will grow more. Actually, this was in a large scale. This was first tried in 2009. This was the Indo-German Lohafex experiment. In 2009, in the Southern Ocean, they tried it. Some around 300 square kilometer or 350 square kilometer area. They dumped around 1,000 tons or more of very finely ground iron sulfide particles. So these experiments, as I said, are going on for now 2023. That means at least for 14 years, these experiments have been done. What was the result? We can see in the 2009 article from Down to Earth, and this was reported globally. Down to Earth picked up from scientific papers. What the scientists expected, the bloom, phytoplankton boom, didn't happen to that extent. There are multiple reasons, but there was a phytoplankton boom. That means the phytoplankton grew more. But what happened is, as the phytoplankton grew more and more, the zooplankton, which eats the phytoplankton, because there is more food, zooplankton also grew more. And as a result of this phytoplankton, zooplankton boom, there is far more oxygen being taken out of the ocean waters by both the phytoplankton and the zooplankton, because all of them have to take the oxygen, breathing oxygen. So what happened is the entire area got deoxygenated. So any marine plants and animals will need oxygen that is dissolved in the water. So if you have a sudden phytoplankton boom and as a result zooplankton boom, the biological oxygen demand of that area will go up, and as a result, that ocean area will get deoxygenated. Deoxygenated means not zero oxygen, but much less oxygen than is required for living beings to sustain themselves. So one adverse effect is this. Second effect that was seen is that because the phytoplankton was being eaten by the zooplankton, much of that was eaten by small marine animals like shrimps and all, krill and all. So actually not much of the phytoplankton died and sank down to the ocean bottom. So they absorbed carbon dioxide, but that carbon dioxide came back to the carbon cycle because this was moving around in the biological cycle. It was not going out of the biological cycle into the ocean bottom. So in that sense, it was a failure. And as I said, as per my knowledge, there were 17 experiments, except 2 which claimed some degree of success. Others didn't have much of this. There is a third category which is now being pushed very large scale. But let me explain also that carbon sequestration, if it is done in manners which impact on the Earth system, I'll not go into detail because of time, then it can be counted, as I said, like genetically engineering plants. But now there are artificial trees which has been created, which has been experimented upon. It's structures which resembles trees, not exactly, but artificial structure resembling trees, where systems have been created which will soak in carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, isolate that carbon dioxide, and take it out and store this. So these are called artificial trees. So if you have huge fields of artificial trees, that will also be considered geoengineering. But again, if you really have afforestation or plantation, because you can't really create forest, you can do plantations. You can create forest by giving enough time to that space. But if you have to do quickly, you can do plantation. So if you do plantation of very high carbon sequestration, genetically engineered trees, that will be considered as geoengineering. But if you are encouraging forest growth, or if you are just doing afforestation, as it is called, then as of now, those are not called geoengineering. So there is a difference between this. So the impacts of, as I said, impact of aerosol injection in the stratosphere, there are 3 major impacts that we identified, that scientists have identified: acid rain, then impact on monsoon and rainfall, and the third is even on the oceans. See, the marine cloud brightening, that is another atmospheric domain, solar radiation management geoengineering project. Domain is which area it is being applied: space, atmosphere, land, water. And what kind? Solar radiation management, carbon dioxide removal, earth radiation management. So I have not covered the earth radiation management. Just let me give one example. The earth radiation management targets that earth can radiate more energy out into space. How that can be done? One is, if the earth's temperature increase, then you will radiate more. But we are not artificially increasing the temperature of the earth. The other is, whatever impediments are there, you remove that. So one proposal is this very high altitude, very thin striated clouds, cirrus clouds. If those are removed, then the earth those actually absorb a lot of this radiated back heat. So if you can reduce the cirrus clouds or eliminate the cirrus clouds, then the earth, which is the radiation that is going out from the earth, which is the low energy radiation, that can go back into space rather than being captured by the clouds. So cirrus clouds removal is one method of earth radiation management. There are other proposals also. I can also have many other proposals. In fact, recently, 2 US universities have experimented, and they have come out with a material which can, even in full sunlight, they can radiate back more than they get. So these are engineering materials. No geoengineering proposal has come on based on that, but I guess in the next 4 or 5 years, maybe some geoengineering proposal will be coming from that side also. So I think I have talked about all the domains, all the types, and given some examples. I might have missed some kinds of example, but the impacts, as I said, one major impact of the most favored projects with the solar radiation management, the most feared impact is impacting rainfall, climate, and monsoon. Because if you are not allowing the heat to come in, the monsoon winds will not be created, and there will be lack of rain, there will be drought, and there will be famine, for most likely food shortage, food crisis. So that's a likely scenario if we attempt that in large scale. In small scale, it doesn't matter. Of course, here I would mention a reverse thing. For many years, some countries are practicing another kind of, you can call it geoengineering, is that cloud seeding. Because the areas where you are having clouds but not having rainfall, particularly China has used it regularly. Even now, every year China uses cloud seeding in a very large scale to get rainfall in areas where it is dry. In fact, some of our Indian states have tried this earlier. Karnataka and some other southern Indian states have tried cloud seeding. But since cloud seeding is not intended to directly address climate change, that means either to reduce the incoming radiation or to reduce the carbon dioxide. So as of now, there is a sort of confusion whether you can include that in geoengineering or that cannot be included. So that's a gray area. But if it is done in very large scale, then obviously it will be geoengineering, because you are changing the characteristics of the earth systems in geological scale, which is basically the definition of geoengineering. The impacts of marine cloud brightening has other impacts. See, as I said, the oceans are also very productive, biologically productive systems. And the ocean life cycle depends, as I said earlier, on the basic food, that is the phytoplankton. So if you are blocking out solar radiation over a very large area of the oceans, then what happens is that in that very large area, phytoplankton cannot grow. Because if they cannot get sunlight, whatever carbon dioxide they get, carbon dioxide itself is not enough. They have to get sunlight. Any photosynthesis needs sunlight. So if you block out the sunlight, that whole large area of the ocean, there will be no phytoplankton growth. And if there is no phytoplankton growth, higher forms of life will not be sustained there. Because phytoplankton and zooplankton are the basis of the ocean food web. So that's one major impact is there. What other areas? Okay, let me now address some of the questions that are coming. Or if you have, Kavya, if you have anything that I missed, you want to point out?
No, I think it's great. Unless, of course, somebody wants to talk about projects that are specific to India, or want to know if there are any such plans or to do similar projects here or any in the pipeline. Yeah.
There are a lot of monitoring being done. I think Geoengineering Monitor, etc. group where you are working, they also have a website, Geoengineering Monitor, and there are others who are monitoring. But there are attempts by Indian groups, as I said, in Indian territory, because Indian groups are involved in geoengineering experiments, and all these are experiments, not in very large scale, but both in Indian territory and in international areas. Like, beyond 200 nautical miles in the sea is nobody's land. It's a commons. So the Lohapex experiment, which happened in 2009, was in that territory, which was an Indo-German collaboration. The ship was German, National Institute of Oceanography in Goa, they, and one institute, I'm forgetting, Wilhelm something institute in Germany, they collaborated. And there were other countries' scientists, they collaborated. So that was one experiment where India participated. India played a leading role, Indian scientists and Indian scientific institution, government scientific institution, NIO, which was in international waters. But in 2022, they did an experiment very silently outside somewhere in Arabian Sea, outside Goa. So that was another ocean carbon dioxide removal. That means creating extra fertility to the ocean water to see how much phytoplankton growth and how much carbon dioxide removal take place, etc. There was one attempt in somewhere in the Ladakh Himalayas about more of that. Some of the other people can say Ladakh Himalayas, because that is one area, because there is no cloud, it's high altitude, very clear weather. So the solar energy that comes in is very strong. So if you can modify the albedo there, it gives you a far better result, because there is no cloud. So there is nothing to capture the radiation that is going out. So in Ladakh, there was one attempt in solar radiation management, one experiment that was done. And then there is another, show the other slide that I showed, that Indian experiment.
Give me a minute. This one?
This is, as I said, this is another, and as I'm repeating, all these are called research experiments. These are called research. Scientists are proposing, and repeatedly, when we raise these objections, that these are the impacts that we know of. They said, unless we experiment, we are not proposing. Every scientist that is involved, like I have interacted internationally with multiple groups, Ocean Home, Scripps Institute, Ocean Home, Woodsole, all of them are saying, we are not proposing that we do this in large scale, but we are proposing that we must do the research, because unless we do the research, if it becomes urgent, if the climate is at the point of breakdown and there is no other way, that is the argument they give, then we will not be prepared. Then we will not know which impacts, how much impact, what is manageable, what is not manageable. So all of them propose this research based on that argument. So Indian groups are also, several Indian universities also got funding, and this cloud aerosol interaction and precipitation, this is enhancement. This is both a cloud seeding and aerosol interaction experiment. And this research is also going on. This is a research project. There are others. I'm not aware of all the projects that are going on in India, because some of these are also being done very secretively, and it needs to be followed. Now, can we get back to some of the questions? I think a lot of questions.
Yeah. So somehow the questions have come directly to me. The first one is from Tejo, asking that cloud seeding is the same term as used for making rainfall. What is the difference?
There is no difference. Cloud seeding is done to increase rainfall, because often there is cloud means your water vapor has condensed into water particles. As long as it is water vapor, you cannot see that in the air. It is invisible. But the moment it condenses into very tiny water particles, water droplets, it becomes a little reflective. You can see it as cloud. But if it is very tiny droplets, then it do not drop down as rain. So what cloud seeding does is introduce in the cloud very fine particles, which are called seeds, silver iodide particles, other particles, so that the water can condense in larger amount, larger droplets around that seed. So if they become larger, greater than 0.5 mm, 1 mm, then they drop as a rainfall. So cloud seeding is done to do rainfall. There's no difference.
The next question is from Claire, asking about carbon dioxide removal technologies like DAC, I think that's direct air capture, and what about BECCS, and what are the risks of CDR?
See, as I said, as of now, there is like this Convention on Biological Diversity, if you know, they had a moratorium. They adopted a moratorium on geoengineering projects, which is being challenged again, because the main climate forum, UNFCCC, there is no such moratorium, but in the CBD, there is a moratorium. In general terms, as I explained twice, the carbon dioxide direct air capture or capture from a concentrated source are not considered as geoengineering project. Direct air capture means, and as I said, if direct air capture, like artificial trees, if they are done in a very large scale, then that can be categorized as geoengineering. But if you are capturing, like already, there are several plants which are running, which are doing direct air capture. The most successful, quote unquote, successful plant is running in Iceland. What it is doing is, because Iceland, there are a lot of geothermal electricity. So, electricity is very cheap there. They're using that cheap electricity to run huge fans. They're sucking in atmospheric air and then reacting it with some chemical, which is as dissolving the carbon dioxide. And then they are pumping that carbon dioxide underground, because underground there is a rock which the carbon dioxide reacts to become carbonate rocks. So that is a direct air capture. I think it's Climeworks or something like that. The company name is Climeworks. So they are, and this is being tom-tommed over the last 3-4 years quite a lot. But the cost is very prohibitive. That apart, cost is still something like $250 or $240 per ton. It is expensive, extremely expensive per ton of carbon dioxide removed, even though the electricity is very cheap. And even though this cannot be replicated everywhere, this is a direct air capture, because you are capturing carbon dioxide from normal atmospheric air, not from the chimney of a coal power plant or a chimney of a coal blast furnace of a steel plant. If you capture the carbon dioxide from a power plant or from gas fields or from oil fields, then it is not direct air capture, it is carbon sequestration and storage. But if you are taking out carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, then it is direct air capture and storage, and many other things are there. Direct air carbon capture. So these are still far from reality in the sense of viability. It's feasible, technology has been demonstrated, but technology can only be applied in specific geographic areas. Geography and geology has to suit, because you have to have those kind of rocks which reacts with carbon dioxide to become carbonate. And this we know in Iceland we have, in Oman we have, but everywhere you cannot have that. The other option of direct air capture is you capture the carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, isolate it through a solution. The easiest solution is calcium oxide, and then separate it out, or other solutions are there. Like we all did experiments in school lab, chemistry lab. And everybody who studied chemistry in school did this kind of experiment. And then you separate it out and then store it in underground, either abandoned salt mine or an underground cave or under the sea under very high pressure, and so that it either becomes a liquid or it is very so highly compressed, substantial amount of carbon dioxide can be kept. There is a very grave danger in all this kind of carbon capture and storage. All of you probably, of course not all of you, but most people probably have sometime come across. There are multiple disasters like this. One of the most infamous is the Lake Nyos disaster, which happened last century, 1960 something. So 68 or 6 something, somewhere around that. What happened is, naturally under Lake Nyos in Cameroon, huge amount of carbon dioxide was stored. Naturally, because carbon dioxide also is generated by biological matter. So some disturbance in the lake waters, we suddenly released that carbon dioxide. And it happened in the night, late night, and something like 1,800 people were killed. Many thousands of cattle and domestic animals were killed. Wild animals in the surrounding areas were in Cameroon, because carbon dioxide is a silent killer. Once it comes out under very, as we all know, if we have to store substantial amount of carbon dioxide underground, carbon dioxide is a gas, so we have to keep it under very high pressure to keep it there. So some geological disturbance or some crack in the rock and soil can release that carbon dioxide. And the carbon dioxide do not have a smell, do not have a color. So you will not get any warning. And if you are sleeping on the floor or at a lower place, carbon dioxide will spread, displace the oxygen, displace the air, and you will slowly die. And that's exactly what happened in Lake Nyos disaster. 2 such disasters happened in the last 200, 300 years, which we know of. But this kind of disaster has happened historically earlier also. Even in Egypt, there is a record. Egyptian civilization earlier, there is a record. So these are a clear danger. If we have tens of thousands, maybe lakhs of places, millions of places.
Soumya, you got muted. Yeah.
You have disastrous situations, possibly disastrous situations in millions of places. So which community will willingly accept a very large amount, say 2 million ton, 10 million ton of carbon dioxide stored under high pressure under your village or under your town or under your area? I will not accept, because if it comes out, I'll not even know before I die. So this is another big danger. The Bake's question, that's a biological, basically biological energy and capture. That means you grow trees, use those trees, biological energy, use those trees as fuel. Instead of coal, oil, and gas, use grown trees as fuel. And when you burn those fuel, the carbon dioxide that is emitted, you capture and store. The capture and store part is highly problematical, that I already explained. But there is one point which people don't understand, and that's why actually many Bake's proponents also don't understand the science. As I said earlier in today, the efficiency of carbon dioxide, solar energy capture by plants is extremely low, 0.8 to 2%. That means if there is 100 watt of solar energy falling, maximum 2 watt is captured by a plant, efficient plants. Okay, then it grows over years and years, taking water, warming up the earth, because forest albedo or green albedo is higher, the vegetation albedo is much higher. Then when you have to burn this, the efficiency, the burning means you have to go to the Carnot cycle, thermodynamic cycle. That means again, if there is 100 calorie, 100 joules of energy, you cannot get more than 40 joules of energy as effective energy. Because if you have to burn it, that means thermal energy to mechanical energy to other energies, which is the standard route, you have to go through thermodynamics. That's another physics. And thermodynamics limits the efficiency of conversion. That means originally 2% of the energy you captured of the solar energy, then it took years and it wound up. Then out of this 2% maximum, you are getting 40%. That means 2 into 4, 0.8% of the original energy you are getting after waiting for years. So this is a very stupid proposal. The whole Bake's proposal is a very stupid proposal. I don't understand why so-called scientists and all don't understand plain science of photosynthesis, thermodynamics, and albedo. These three one has to understand to see the Bake's is basically a stupid proposal.
Right. There's a question from Nina asking if there are any global bodies like official scientific bodies or governments that are monitoring these experiments across the globe. And if you want, I can tell you other questions also, or we can take it one by one.
One by one, we can just quickly finish
Yeah.
up.
Yeah.
There are a lot of bodies, like one slide we showed. Indian agencies also have formed a body to monitor some of this. What is happening, and many countries have now formed watch and see or monitoring group based on their own interest. But this is a question of monitoring. So many governments have done that. Even some industry bodies have done that. Some collective industry bodies have done this kind of formed this kind of bodies, because the industry groups are looking to geoengineering as one of their escape routes. If they cannot reduce the emissions, the geoengineering is the solution. So they are also forming monitoring body. They have formed also. But the related question, is there any governing mechanism? Globally, there is no governing mechanism. That means, except in the CBD, there is some kind of discussion and an agreement, and the CBD came out with a moratorium. But CBDs dictate don't go in all areas. The Convention on Biological Diversity, the countries have to ratify those decisions. So that moratorium from CBD is there, but in spite of that, a lot of experiments are taking place. And as of now, unlike, say, if you attack another country, of course, now even attacking another country, there is no governing mechanism. You can just attack another country, kill a few lakhs people, or do anything. or just displace some few million people. Though theoretically there is some governing mechanism. The UN is there, the Security Council is there. But unfortunately, in geoengineering, there is no such internationally agreed, accepted governing mechanism. UNFCCC is discussing this. They have some monitoring and they have some groups which is discussing this. Countries have groups, but international, I'm not aware of any governing mechanism which everybody is bound to follow. So technically, even a rogue billionaire can do an experiment. Why rogue? Even as a support. Yes.
Yeah, there was a recent experiment in Mexico, I think, making sunsets. Yeah. There is
in Mexico, then Harvard University.
You're muted.
Sami territory in Sweden.
Yeah. When
suppose they were coming to southern countries, even in India. So a lot of these are, there is no governing mechanism internationally which can prevent this.
Right. There's an interesting question from Sergio. She asks, what would be the impact of painting all buildings white globally to bring down temperatures, as you mentioned?
See, this is what I was talking about repeatedly. This is called reflective roofing. Reflective roofing. And this is nothing new. If you go to our own hot areas, you'll see buildings, roofs are, as I said, white or light color. If you go to southern Greece, most buildings are white. For the simple reason that there is a lot of heat coming in. So if you have white roofing or white those sides, like if you are in a mid latitude, the northern side gets more sun. So northern wall and the roof, if you paint white, then the roof will be cooler and the whole house will be cooler. In fact, I have been doing this for last 35 years. We paint with simple tuna and Fevicol, some 100 rupees cost, and before summer we whitewash our roof, so during the summer it receives less heat, and in the rainy season it partly washes off, so in the winter it again receives more heat. So these are kind of things which traditionally people have done in hot areas. Citywide scales has been proposed also. In fact, there are proposals in hot areas like say Chennai or South Indian cities. A lot of South Indian cities get a lot of heat and it's unbearable and heat is going up and up. In fact, Delhi gets very hot. So there are proposals also that Delhi also should have a reflective roofing. In fact, there is a policy in the Delhi Climate Action Plan. There is a reflective roof policy, a suggestion. So many cities are taking this, but as of now, and this came from this again was launched in a global scale from the UN meeting, I think in 2018, 17 or 18. We were there in the UN when these heat action plans were taken up as a major challenge in UN. It's a global meeting, UN meeting. And after that, a lot of country governments have taken this up. So this reflective roofing and walls are one proposal which possibly can have a positive effect. Not possibly, which will have a positive effect, local environment, plus which will have a multiple positive effect. Because if your house is not warming up so much, heating up so much, then you will spend much less on air conditioning or cooling. That means your electricity consumption will go down. That means more pollution will come down. You will be having less pollution from generating that much of electricity. So it has a cascading benefit. So this is being attempted at city level, not as all world, because there are areas which are very cold. Why should you paint white? In areas where it is very cold, where the house needs to be warmed, you should paint dark.
Yeah, right.
In some areas it is big.
Right. There are two questions from Claire and one from Suhat, and I think we will close after that
Yes.
because we've already it's 4:30 p.m. already. So the two questions are: if any geoengineering projects have proven to yield the results intended, and what is your definition of large scale in order to qualify as geoengineering? I think it's the threshold at which a project becomes a geoengineering project. Like afforestation, which you mentioned before. Yeah.
See, many of the experimental projects can be categorized as successful or as failed. It depends on the viewpoint, and both it has been categorized as successful and failed also. Like the area of, like, see, there is one very clear example on the other side. After this, just I think couple of years ago, this marine fuel regulation came in. North Atlantic and North Pacific, which are the most heavy, which see the most heavy ship traffic. Actually, 2023, both North Atlantic and North Pacific ocean water temperature was very high. The result was the marine fuel, which used to contain a lot of sulfur, because of regulation, sulfur content came down. So there is less aerosol, reflective aerosol, more solar energy is reaching the oceans, so it's heating up. On the other hand, similar kind of wherever there is a natural process of lot of upwelling of water into atmosphere, this churning, the cloud, if you see some seasons, some areas, there are a lot of clouds over the oceanic areas. When you fly, you see a lot of clouds in the oceanic areas. So these experiments have shown success. As I said, two of the ocean carbon dioxide removal projects, as per scientific presentation, they have shown reasonably good success. Most have not shown as per projection, but two have shown reasonably good success. But as I'm saying, the costs have not been taken into account. The success is there. We know there have been experimentally plants which have been created, which can, we know C3 and C4 plants. We know plants which can sequester more carbon dioxide. But do we replace most other plants by plants which will sequester more carbon, or do we have diversity of plants, food plants, other plants? So those kind of questions are there. Otherwise, a lot of these experiments have shown success. Like one very clear example, that stratospheric aerosol injection. Wherever it has been done naturally or in small scale, this is successful. But that success comes at a cost. So most of these, or not all, but many of these geoengineering proposals are technically feasible and can show some of the result that they are claiming, some of the result, technically. But then other impact, because none of the Earth systems are alone, single. So other system impacts actually create complication. What was the second part of the question? Scale. Yeah. See, there is no, as of now, there is no given scale that it has to be 3,000 square kilometer or 3,000 or 4,000 square. It's no such scale. The defining thing is, if it is big enough to impact one of the Earth systems, like say one Earth system is the Arctic sea ice is one Earth system. One Earth system is the Amazon. Amazon is an Earth system. So if there is an experiment to create more reflectivity in the Amazon by doing something over the Amazon, so that will be considered even a part of the Amazon, say 1,000, 2,000 square kilometers. Then that will be considered as a geoengineering. But there is no clear demarcation that so many thousand square kilometers in geological scale, and it has to significantly impact any of the 13 or 14 Earth systems.
Right. The last question would be that recently there were incidences of unseasonal, sudden, heavy rain in short time, which led to submergence in the riverbank of small river in a city like Nagpur. Is there a possibility of experimental clouds from other countries?
No, this is very clear. In fact, as I was saying earlier, I have shared on several groups, I have shared the unusually high ocean surface, which is called SST, sea surface temperature. In 2020, late 22 onward, the ocean surface temperatures are unusually high. Unusually high. In fact, they have broken all records. Not only the Atlantic and Pacific, not only the North Atlantic, North Pacific, which is basically the sulfur aerosol reduction, but throughout the ocean, I have those diagrams. Throughout the world, the ocean surface temperatures are very high. And that's also driving this year, the Antarctic ice formation is very low, because Antarctic just passed through its winter, and it is the lowest ice formation in recorded history. The reason is high ocean surface temperature. And if the and atmospheric temperature also has gone up. For every 1 degree Celsius rise in atmospheric temperature, the atmosphere can hold 7% more moisture. And if the ocean surface is higher temperature, then ocean evaporates more moisture. So oceans are giving more moisture. Atmosphere, because it is warm, the air is holding more moisture. So air is getting up because it is warm, but it is getting up with more moisture. And once it moves, the air cannot stay in one place. Along with the wind, the air comes. And if it is holding more moisture, it has to dump that moisture somewhere. And the moment it finds a comparatively cooler area, that huge load of moisture condenses into water droplets, and there is which is called sometime heavy rain, sometime cloud burst. So these are the kind of reasons. One is very high ocean surface temperature and higher atmospheric temperature, which is causing more moisture to be there in the air, and the more moisture being carried, and that means heavy rain.
Right.
And this year there are multiple graphs which is being recorded from late 2020.
Right, right. I think that's all, and we should wrap up the session now. Yeah. Thank you so much, Soumya. It was a very, very insightful, at least for those of us who are beginning to know what geoengineering is, and we need to find out more about the different types of geoengineering, how it's taking place. It was super useful to get into the details and the different projects that are that are happening around the world. I will now hand it over to Meena.
Thanks, Kavya. I would also like to reiterate, Soumya, thank you so much for this. It was extremely educational for some of us who've been wanting to understand. And it was a great introductory sort of webinar for us just to get into this geoengineering space and what all is happening around the world. Just to tell all of the people who've joined us today, we are going to try and do this as a series of webinars on geoengineering. So we will keep you posted on further webinars that are coming up, and we will also upload this on our YouTube channel. So thank you so much, Kavya. Thank you so much, Soumya. This was great. And we can end our session for today.
Thanks from my side to all the organizers, Kavya, Minal, Sudha, and all the participants too. Okay. See you then.
See you. Thank you everybody for your time.